From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? I'm glad we're back for another episode.
Great to be back for another episode, Steve, and I'm doing well. Yourself?
Doing well. It's our conversations are always a lot of fun, and I think that's why we do this, and hope our audience feels the same. And this one is going to be just like that, and we get to do a one-on-one chat today. Um, the thing that we talked about as an idea was about budgeting for programming, because that can be a uh, a real sticky topic for some people, depending on where your role is and what you do in the industry, and what where you stand within the ability to impact pricing. And sometimes programmers have more of a say, and sometimes they don't. But if we look at things from a big picture view, the client needs to be able to allocate funds. Those funds have to line up with how the project is sold, and then the programmer has to do the work, um, and that all has to match up to a scope of work that uh, is aligns with the an effort. So, um, putting it very very high level, but um, from some of your experience, and some of the things that you have also either worked through in hiring programmers or doing projects on your own. What are some of the factors that impact how programming should be budgeted?
One of the factors that impact is, I would say that probably the first one is, are you doing it in-house or are you outsourcing it? Because if you're doing it in-house, where like my old job, we did 99, if not all actually, I think all the program was in-house. Price wasn't a factor because we're already paying, like, my salary, the other AV salary was already factored in. It was just time allotment that was allow us to work on the code. Here now, as I don't have a programmer on staff, and my role does not grant me the time to program, or nor should it. I should have a programmer on my staff, which I don't have yet. So I need to outsource it, which means I need to pay for it and need to be mindful of the costs that is associated with it. Um, so it's definitely a good question. So those are probably the first two factors. Are you outsourcing it or are you doing it internally? And then I think it actually comes down to functionality. Like, is this a unique space where there is no roadmap? No, what I mean by roadmap, like something that they can compare it to, something that they already have. Like, is this a very unique space, a one-off, or is this like a cookie cutter, something that, in my world, a standard classroom? Like, I could probably have 10 to 100 standard classroom. They're all going to use the same code. That code is going to be cheaper than if I have a unique space that come in that we don't that we need to customize the code for. That's going to cost me more money.
Right, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. I think, well, one of them, comes down to being able to determine who how are the requirements defined, and who sets those parameters. Is that something that is done by, and I imagine it varies on a case by case, but is it done by the integrator? Is it done by the client? Is it done by a third party programmer? Because the one of the big things that we talk about is, understanding the the user's needs, and but then being able to have the conversation of what you're asking for is something that can be done for X amount of dollars or Y amount of dollars. And we have to see where, how does the ask line up with what the budget allows, or and because it'd be great if the ask can set the budget, but I don't know if that's always the case.
Oh, that is never the case. It's the budget's always the last thing thought about. Um, Again, as I mentioned, I think it was our last episode is people want the Ferrari, but they want to pay for a Honda.
Mhm.
They're gonna try to do it as cheaply as they can. Um, they don't want to really scale the budget, and I get that sometimes with the equipment too, because with a side tangent, like there's times where they're like, "Oh, we're only doing this. Can't we use this kind of equipment?" And I have to explain to them like, and they're talking about, going to the big box store and picking up a display here and there. Uh, and I was like, they're not made for their environments, and I have to give all the reasons and all this up, and then they understand why we have to charge almost double the price for the same type of equipment. That when they look at it, code, the problem is you can't really look at. No one understands it. So the way I like to outline mine is I think the user experience, or let me put that, the experience should drive what's going to be the cost. And you have to make it clear. And if that is on the programmer, on the integrator, salesperson, I don't have a great answer for it, but what has to be clear is what is actually going to do and what it will not do. And I think that is more key of what it will not do than what it will do, because a lot of people like to assume, don't clearly say this system will not do this, and they're just gonna assume it's gonna do it. And then you put it in, they're like, wait, why isn't it doing this? You never said it wouldn't do that. Um, so I think that really defining that scope work and defining that what the system won't do, because if you put it in and say, hey, it won't do this, and the user comes back and go, no, I really want that feature, you'd be like, okay, well, this feature is going to be another $5,000 on there.
So one thing that we have been able to offer as a service in that regard, and sometimes it's a tough sell, is doing a a scope development exercise. So it's not writing code, but it's more of outlining the requirements in a high level of detail, so that it can that document in the end can be turned over to a programmer who should have very few questions to um, ask or get answered in order to effectively write code. It's pretty tight and signed off and defined. Um, but there's a cost associated with doing that scope development, and then also the pricing would be set. The programming pricing then would be set based on the outcome of that effort. So or that, and we call it, like, it's a two-phased approach. This is the first phase and the second phase, and sometimes they would hire the company who wrote the scope with them as the one to implement it, and maybe sometimes they wouldn't. They may be able to find a resource that is a better fit for them in that regard. But that helps to eliminate some of the confusion, and gather all the information. I guess what it comes down to still is, when we're defining a new system, you know, understanding what we need and being able to spec hardware and installation, I think, is a lot more definitive. But programming can vary so greatly, so there needs to be some anchor point to be able to say, here's the price I have, here's the money I have to spend. What can you do for me for this? Or here's what I want. Let's work on defining this so that we can price it accurately.
100%. Um, it I think that the definition, defining things is key, and I feel that is missed many times. uh, because people are like, "Oh, we could do that later." That's a kick the can down the road, and then you get the bill for kicking the can, and you're like, "Wait, no, I wasn't ready for this."
And in certain situations, and I would imagine the bigger the organization, like that money is already been allocated and it's been budgeted, well in advance, and there isn't a lot of room for change. I don't live in that world so much, but I can imagine that that would put people in a tough situation.
Oh, definitely. Um, so being in a tough situation is definitely hard because you want to do right by your client, especially if you have a great relationship. And but you also, you know, you got to take account for your time and effort put into things. So you don't want to upset the client, be like, "Hey, I'm coming in and this is going to be the price because this is all your requirements." When, be frank, some salespeople, they do their job by selling the system however they can, and they sometimes undercut the cost of programming.
It's that's unfortunately for all the years I've been in the industry, that's the easiest line to be able to cheat because it is a a cost that is not tangible. And
Yeah, and no one knows it, and it's one of those items that no one can explain, um, and no one really understands, like, because it's not tangible, like you say, but they really also don't understand the work and the stuff that goes behind it, and they just think it's, I wanna say simple, um, but really, like, no one talks about programming, really. So, to them, it's magic. It's it's magic, they have no words to talk about. Because I even know, like, a lot of times I used to joke years ago, whenever I wanna try to say no in a nice way, I would always respond, "Well, for security reasons, we can't do this." No one can touch security, but they understand the importance of security, and they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense," and, like, even though they don't really understand, just because they hear the word security reasons, they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense, we can't do this." But you can say, "Well, the program required this," and they're like, "Wait, what? I don't, you're speaking another language to me."
yeah, if we expand upon that a little bit too, um, I would say that programmers, a lot of times they live for the um, impact of being able to accomplish a hard task or satisfy a client or do something that they haven't done before. And they'll really get into doing something like that, which can be to their detriment because even it, I know we've kind of used the plumber and analogy a lot of times, but it's the knowledge that you have, not the time that it takes to do the work. And it's and we need to be understanding the value of programming, which is going to also help to contribute to a lot of things to help elevate the a programmer's role, including compensation and including respect and so forth. So it really gets to be a tricky thing because programmers wired to be able to satisfy a client and say yes and want to be able to make their product as valuable and as usable as possible, and it gets to be almost like a moral dilemma.
Yeah, I can definitely see, and I, now that you say it that way, I got thinking, and I want to say that programmers wanna do great by their client, like you say, like, "Oh, yeah, I'll take this on because I wanna serve the client needs." But also, I'm gonna say, I think programmers are also, in this mind, are a little more selfish, and it's a puzzle. We get into programming because we like to solve puzzles. So it's a puzzle for us to solve, and we're like, "Ooh, I wanna solve this puzzle."
Yeah. And I think part of that is, getting the wow at the end,
Yeah.
you know.
And like you say, it's a detrimental ourselves. We're putting our foot in our mouth because we're like, okay, I want to solve this puzzle. It really should, you know, cost 3 times as than I want to quote because I really want to solve this puzzle. So I'm gonna, devalue my time because I really want to solve this puzzle.
Absolutely. And I've experienced that. And so if we take that a little further, one of the things that really does is it negatively impacts the organization you're working for. Because
Yes.
if projects can't be done on time and on budget, it, the organization's going to suffer. And because in the end, almost every company exists to be profitable or to serve a client, and needs to be able to live within certain parameters. And yes, we want to be able to do our best work, and always be able to wow our client, and feel excited about the work that we do, but we can't do it at our detriment.
Agreed. Agreed. So how do we? I know that what we're kind of talking about, but how do like I'll flip this on to you, Steve. Like, how do you get your team to not, put their foot in their mouth and detriment their value?
Um, Very effective management, and also getting them all to subscribe to um, common goals and vision, I think, is really what it comes down to. But it's taken a long time, but has to come from leadership, and it has to come from building a team around a manager who has a good business head, and a good business sense of, and understands why about, if we let our projects go over budget consistently, this is going to put us in hot water, and it's just not something that is going to lead to a good outcome.
Interesting. That's good. Yeah. So it's not only on the programmer to make sure that they're setting their value, but it also is on leadership to drive and make sure that the programmer is not not blinded, but have blinders on that they're just trying to solve their puzzle, and but understanding the full scale of what that means.
And I think part of what we need to look at too is not only using, motivating your programmers, to get better technically, but also to be able to be more efficient and more productive. Because, like we said in our last episode, what you need to think about is, how do you contribute to this overall success of the company? Because that's how the company can reward you. And um, and 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 it really has to be very much a cyclical, or a closed loop. And it's and if programmers or software developers understand how they are able to help the company succeed, they will also be able to succeed themselves, and they will also advance. But it's putting those um, objectives in place, and goals, so, along with the technical goals, to help technical team advance.
Huh? Great point there, Steve. Great point.
It's No, I think this is it's a tricky topic, because there are, um it's not something that's going to, probably ever go away, but it's hopefully something that we could work to educate and to be able to get out in front of opportunities. And it exists in all different aspects of the industry. It's not just in AV programming, but it's in software development and API integration, like what we do when we're speaking with manufacturers. We need them to understand how much does it cost to write um, as a integration with a control platform, and they some of them just don't even have any idea, and because of that, they don't have that money just lying around. It's something that they have to budget for, or they have to be able to find within a product budget.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, I think that's a good segue into the next kind of question I had for you that I was thinking about this is, all right, so we know a client's going to have a budget. That's a given. All right. We are saying here that programmers should set their value. We need to be valuable, all this stuff. But you know what? Sometimes there's a mismatch. And I hate saying this. We all know it's out there, the favorite word, value engineer. So, how can we as programmers still keep our value, but help value engineer so that we can? Yeah.
Um, the the suggestion that I would have is being able to, well, one, it comes down to building a relationship and trust, and hopefully your client understands that they can work with you and that you're going to be thinking in their best interest, not trying to take advantage in any way. The second part is being able to get them to understand what um, the effort goes along with what they're asking for. And sometimes there's a disproportionate effort for something that they're asking. And we shouldn't just take that at face value. We should make sure that we point out and say, these things that you're asking for, very reasonable. This one thing that's going to take a whole lot more time. Do you understand that? And is that important to you? Also, maybe bring some suggestions to the table and say, these are some things that we could recommend. And I think the third part is perhaps break it up into the different tiers of options and say, this is the base level, which is a must have. This is um, a nice to have. And this is certainly an extra.
I like that approach. And I try to do that on a lot of my projects, and sometimes I just always get to the top of the level. It's like, okay, here you go. This is what you're getting. Um, so yeah, no, it's I agree having the three tier, like, okay, this gets you in the door. And what I mean by the door, and I'm not saying us into the door for the client, but more of gets the user into the space they want, but it doesn't always get all the bells and whistles they want it. Gets them in the door, lets them do what they want to do. And then you have, okay, this meets some of the additional features we want. And then you have, the full blown, this meets all my requirements.
And there's nothing wrong with being able to say that we're going to do this next year and this the following year, perhaps. And I think that that would be very promising if there's some way to be able to have a commitment associated with it. Let's do a great job on this one, and we're going to do the next upgrade in a year, and we're going to include these other options. You've given me a price for it, so I know how to budget for it. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's I don't know. I look at, I would much rather be able to work with somebody and grow with them than um, just say this is a take it or leave it situation.
Yeah. No, I think that, like you said, building that relationship, it's like it should never be a this is what it is, or I'm walking type deal. Like it's never all or nothing. There's always a middle ground that could solve, or not solve, but serve both parties' interests.
And there's also a lot of different ways to approach the same outcome. And sometimes, it could be a matter of doing something hard coded versus variable versus done through files and or done through some type of a database. It's there's that you're still accomplishing the same goal. There are advantages to doing it in a more advanced and elegant way, but you can start to work toward that over time. And perhaps too, if a company knows that you're looking to do this, they could build in the foundation to be able to grow a lot easier with you within the system.
Oh, agree. I definitely agree. I think that's a good way to go.
Well, probably a good place for us to wrap this one, but hopefully this is a good conversation that our audience will appreciate. I know it's another topic that comes up quite a bit, and glad to answer questions about it and continue the dialogue in our LinkedIn group for Ask the Programmer. So please join us there. James, how can people get in touch with you, continue the conversation, and keep up with what you're doing?
Again, you can find me on the socials. I'm out there, X as underscore James, or on X as AV underscore James King. I'm on LinkedIn, in our community of Ask the Programmer on there. Again, you Google me, you'll find me.
Absolutely. And how's any updates on HEPMA and some of the stuff that you're doing there?
So I'm really not that involved with but I mean, still a member, active member on there. But I'm no longer with the board of directors. So I know our annual virtual conference is coming up soon. I know that the boards and the chairs and the planning people are working very hard to make that conference a great conference again. That usually early February-ish time, so a couple months from now. It's always, I would say, and maybe I'm a little biased here, I would say it's probably one of the best conferences out there, virtual or non-virtual, even in person, because it's really lively, not just between the speakers, but also in the chat. The audience really gets involved, and the discussions really go in depth. I mean, Stephen, you and I, that's where we met and kind
Mhm.
of planned this out, was from one of the virtual conferences. So I know that's moving forward. And again, HEPMA has a lot of big plans. They're gonna be at ISC, they're gonna be at Infocom, um, probably a bunch of other places that I'm not fully aware of anymore right now.
Fair enough. Well, I agree. That's kind of our anniversary, and we're about to approach episode. Excuse me. We're about to hit episode 200, so that's pretty exciting.
Yes, it is very exciting. I was just thinking that.
For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. You can reach my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. And we are help to support this podcast as well as support programmers who are looking to make their projects more efficient and effective and control products more seamlessly. We develop the building blocks that connect products and control platforms, as well as provide additional features and functionality. You can find those at controlconcepts.net. This podcast, if you're watching the video version on YouTube, you can get the audio on your favorite podcast player, or if you're listening on audio, then check us out on YouTube. And we'd like to hear from you, and we'd like to keep in touch and like to know what you like and any ideas and feedback that you have, as well as if you're interested in being a guest. So please reach out to us in all the methods that we've mentioned previously. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.